dark abyss.
Santiago Flight 513 took off from Germany on September 4, 1954, and vanished somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. A fruitless massive search was conducted, and the investigators were finally forced to believe that the aircraft was crashed.
Welcome back. I'm Eve. Today's episode is again a little bit different, but I like to keep switching it up a little bit on you. So it is true crime, but it's also about a plane crash. We haven't done a plane crash yet, so we're going to get into it. On today's episode, we go into the Santiago Flight 513 mystery. Hundreds, if not thousands of stories have been told about planes going missing or mysterious crimes taking place while passengers were aboard. After years of investigation, some cases may possibly be cleared up, but some may never be resolved. It likely applies to Santiago Flight 513's sudden disappearance in 1953, though the plane mysteriously reappeared 35 years later. When a plane vanishes without a trace, dozens of things could have caused it. It's usually assumed that the plane crashed in a remote area such as mountains, deserts, or even the sea. This is because it's super difficult for a plane to land somewhere off of its course without being noticed. Often after years of research and patience, parts of the plane may wash up on shore or be found in remote areas years after the presumed crash occurred. However, that is not always the case. Researchers spend years and countless hours searching for clues that can help resolve cases like this. But sometimes, the cases simply remain unsolved because there's no evidence left to go on. It was September 4th, 1954, when a Lockheed aircraft was getting ready to take off in Germany. The plane was scheduled to leave Germany and arrive in Chile, located in South America, just a few hours later. There were 88 passengers on board, and the crew consisted of just 4 people. This was a completely ordinary flight, and nothing unusual took place before the plane took off. After all, flights like this took place multiple times per day, every day, this time of year. All of the passengers were ordinary people, and there was no additional cargo on board that would cause anyone to be concerned. It's difficult to state how normal this flight was, but by all means, there was nothing extraordinary about this flight in any way. The weather was clear and uneventful, but just a few hours after the plane took off, it vanished without a trace. The plane had been soaring over the Atlantic Ocean at the time, so many people assumed that something had gone wrong and the plane had crashed. But there were no emergency calls placed by the pilot, and no distress signals were sent either. Everyone was wondering what had happened to the flight, but there were no answers. All 92 people who were on board the flight the day were pronounced dead. The event was tragic, but plane crashes are not unheard of. So what made this flight so interesting? It was the afternoon of October 12th, 1989. This was a normal mundane day at the airport in Porto Alegre, Brazil. However, an unidentified aircraft popped up on the radar. Air traffic control did their best to contact the aircraft pilot, but they never received a response. Considering the airport was quite busy at the time, the plane circled the airport multiple times before it eventually touched down when the runway was clear. Since the crew on board the aircraft were unresponsive, the airport sent a team of security workers out to the runway to inspect the plane before the passengers were allowed to exit. As they made their way onto the runway, the workers were left breathless. They couldn't believe their eyes. The side of the plane read Santiago Airlines, but this airline had been shut down since 1956. They also noticed that the aircraft was a Lockheed Super Constellation. Even more fearsome was the flight number was 513. What further took the workers by surprise was that the aircraft looked as if it were brand new. It showed no signs of age and looked just like it had when it departed the airport in Germany 35 years ago. Unsure of how to proceed, the security team decided to open the plane's doors and go inside. But unfortunately, what they were greeted with caused their hearts to skip a few beats. On board, they discovered dozens of passengers all securely seated But all that remained were the skeletons of the 88 passengers who were on the flight all those years ago. As they made their way to the cockpit, they also found that the crew was skeletonized as well. To make the discovery even eerier, the pilot's hands were still gripped tightly to the controls.
The more strange scene was that of the skeletonized pilot, Captain Miguel Victor Curry, who was sitting in the intact position and was still apparently clutching the controls.
Keeping in mind, this incident occurred in the middle of a typical day when other planes were coming and going as usual. Management had no idea how to proceed, so they did their best to cover up the story until they could figure out what was going on. When news companies inevitably found out about the plane, headlines would read, "Flight 513 had landed 35 years late." The public would not find out anything else about the flight, opening the doors for all sorts of conspiracy theories and wild stories that would circulate for years to come. So what do you think happened to Santiago Flight 513?